Hey, what's up everybody? This is OurMusicBox, and today I want to show you guys a new Amara build that I think is one of the strongest builds in the game. Now, my last build video was my Chimera Amara build that was able to do 4 different elements with every shot of my weapon. Now, this build, you're actually able to do all 5 elements with every shot of your weapon, or almost every shot of your weapon. And since we're using a brainstormer as our main weapon, this will actually cause chain lightnings that hit everything in the area and just constantly shock everything. And how this is set up, that chain lightning will also hit as every single element in the game. So all 5, it can also apply all 5 status effects. So you can have 5 different status effects of every element on pretty much everything in the area when this chain lightning goes off, which it goes off all of the time. So it is absolutely ridiculous. It's probably the most excited I've been about any build in this game. Just being able to get every single element going off a single shot of a weapon is insane to me. So let's go straight into the talents. So for the talents, this is the same exact talent layup that I did with my Chimera Amara build, and I've done builds that use pretty close to the same setup as well, because this build is overall built around ties that bind. So I'm going to quickly go through this. If you want a little bit longer of an explanation on how all of this stuff works, go check out my last build, which was the Chimera Amara build. I go into a bit more detail on all these talents. But basically, 5 out of 5 do harm, increase action skill damage, which affects our ties that bind linked enemies. With 3 to 3 fast hands, increase reload speed, weapon swap speed, mode switch speed, always good. 1 into violent tapestry and 1 into alacrity, which gives us increased reload speed. Violent tapestry is increased status effect chance. 5 out of 5 restless, increased cooldown rate, always good. 1 into Ascendant, which increases our soul sap healing or increases Allure if you want to do that. Also, some people use Stillness of Mind, which you can use as well if you want to. Then we have 3 out of 3 Laid Bare, which increases the damage for enemies that get hit by your action skill or get damaged by your action skill. 3 out of 3 Wrath, which gives you gun damage, and then after an action skill you get double that gun damage, which is a pretty massive gun damage increase. Then we have 3 out of 3 Awakening, which increases our rush stacked effectiveness, so our do harm, our alacrity, and our violent tapestry. Now, my other build I actually did into From Rest, but I wanted to put that last point in Restless instead. If you want to go more From Rest, you can as well. Then we have Avatar, which gives us more bonus rush stacks, up to 25 total of the generic rush stacks, and it lets us use pretty much 2 of our action skills within 1 cooldown. Then for Fist of Elements tree, we have 5 out of 5 Anima, increased status effect damage, duration, all really good. Just basically our status effects getting put on steroids pretty much. Then we have Infusion, which takes a portion of our weapon damage and makes it our action skill element, which is one of the elements that we use, and I always keep it on Soulfire for this build. Then 5 out of 5 Tempest, increased elemental damage, which is good. We do all 5 elements. Increased extra shock damage, which is good because the main damage we're dealing is shock, because we're mainly using a brainstormer. Dread, which gives us increased damage after grasping an enemy, that if you kill a grass enemy you get your weapon instantly reloaded. Then we're using Indiscriminate, which basically just gives your bullets a chance to ricochet to nearby targets. Deep Well, which increases our magazine size of elemental weapons. Our action skill element mainly is Ties that Bind, but we do have a alternate that we can use. Then 2 out of 2 Sustainment, which gives us lifesteal off our elemental damage we deal with our weapons. And this is pretty massive, because if you get a chain lightning proc and there's a couple enemies around, it's going to full heal you pretty much instantly. So you heal just a ton with this, even though it's only 8%, it's a ton. Now, the 2 action skills you can use, really, or 3 I guess, is Ties that Bind. This is the main thing you're going to be using until you need to go up against like a boss or a tankier enemy you need to deal with, like the Thor enemies, the like medium-ish robots in the new raid. So if you need to do that and you have any anointed weapon, you have the 2 anointed effects, which is Phase Cast increases your weapon damage by 250%, and then Phase Slam increases it by 300%. So whichever one of those, you're going to want to be using weapons like that with those for boss killing. And customs are probably one of the best you're going to get. They're absolutely ridiculous. So just shred any boss, especially with these. So if you be fighting a boss, you just switch to your phase cast, probably reverberation because it does more damage. Or you would switch to your phase slam, which you're just changing to that for bosses mostly, and using the weapons that have those anointed on them. It doesn't make any sense to switch to those ever if you don't have those anointed effects on weapons like this. And that's pretty much it for all the talents and everything. So into the gear, which is where the majority of all of our elemental different damage types come from. So first off, the main thing I'm using is a Brainstormer, which, as we talked about, shooting targets can just cause chain lightnings, which does a ridiculous amount of damage because it jumps between all the targets in the area, constantly doing damage. It can apply all your status effect damage over times, and it does a ridiculous amount of damage. And with Ties That Bind, since it's hitting all the targets in the area, it's also chaining back to the original target, which then hits the other targets again, just doing ridiculous AoE damage. And this one has, on actions go in, the next 2 magazines will have 50 additional bonus radiation damage. So that's bonus, so that's extra radiation damage. That's not just an increase in damage, that actually adds radiation damage as 50% of the damage you're dealing. Now, on the next 2 magazines, we will pretty much have this up majority of the time, since we have Avatar for 2 action skills in 1 cooldown, then we have decent cooldown. Now this build is going to get better when the Guardian Ring talents are reactivated, because if you don't know, pretty much all these talents don't work right now. They're all broken. And topped off, which is, it gives you action skill cooldown rate at full shield, is ridiculous. It pretty much like doubles your cooldown rate or something along those lines. It's pretty insane. So that'll just make this build much stronger, because you want as many Ties That Bind up as you possibly can. Now for the class mod we're using, it's a phaser class mod, which gives you just weapon damage and action skill cooldown rate depending on how many basic or generic rush checks you have. We can go up to 25, which pretty much we get 25 anytime we use an action skill. And with this, and with Ties That Bind or any phase grass, you can just not hit something and you'll stack up your do harm and violent tapestry, like you're seeing right here, 25 times every time you use it, stacking up to 99 times, which gives you a ridiculous amount of damage increase and a ridiculous amount of status effect chance increase. So that's why you want the phaser class mod. Now for the shield I got pretty lucky on actually getting a recharger, which is my favorite shield. I recommend trying to get a recharger, because in my opinion, it's one of the best shields in the game. I do wish it didn't have the -10 max health. Even though it's only 10, I still wish it didn't have that on it. The main thing you're looking for, though, is on action skill end, gain 50% bonus corrosive damage with weapons for 10 seconds. Now, this will be up a lot of the time. Now, my last build, I actually had this on a grenade. I did not at all know this could come on a shield. I'd never seen one. I'd never seen one on Reddit, so I didn't know. And the spreadsheets that have like all the anointeds and all the items in the game don't specify what this can come on, so I thought it was only grenades. But then I actually got this as a drop, and I found out, well, it can come on shields, and it works. They do stack. And now I have a grenade with extra cryo damage. So this is where cryo damage comes from, is my grenade. This is where my corrosive damage comes from. The shield, also these anointed can come in any element, so it can come in all 5 elements, so you can switch however you want to. Then from our Brainstormer, we're getting that radiation damage off action skill end. Then we're getting the shock damage just because the Brainstormer is shock. And then since we're using infusion, which converts a proportion of our damage to fire or our action skill element, and we're using soul fire to give us fire, we have all 5 elements in the game. And I don't really consider kinetic an element. So all 5 elements in the game, and after you use an action skill, then reload our Brainstormer, you do a shot, and that just did every single element in the game in one single shot. It's pretty nuts, because also take into consideration that both of these, the bonus cryo, the bonus corrosive, that's bonus on top of everything you're doing. So if you hit just a kinetic damage. So we're using the Maggie with no talents or anything, and we just hit a Maggie shot, it's going to do just kinetic damage. Use our action skill, then we have 50% bonus on top of the normal damage the Maggie's dealing, and 50% bonus cryo on top of that. And since we're using the brainstormer, it's shock. It's also getting another 50% bonus radiation damage. So that's 150% bonus. And we do have bonuses to elemental damage. So that's just adding more damage on top of all the 5 elements. And as you'll see in the footage, this is ridiculous. Especially for the new raid. Specifically for the new raid, because both boss fights have a ridiculous amount of add enemies all the time in the fight. Then while you're running through the raid, there's always like a dozen enemies up. So you're just ties binding an enemy, chain lightninging with brainstormer to everything, and just, you'll see it's just destroying everything. It's absolutely ridiculous. Now, there's some other good weapons you're going to want to use. Now, as we already talked about, cut summons that are good for boss killing with these anointed effects are always going to be good for boss killing. If you have other weapons and you don't have cut summons that have the anointed phase slam or phase cast, the anointed effects on them like these have, then you can use those as well, but anything else is going to be really good. Now, for kind of some tanky stuff, if there's not a lot of enemies around, the brainstormer isn't going to be that good, but the Maggie is also really good. I also got a good roll in this, which is one of the new ones. Consecutive hits, increase weapon damage by 1% per hit. Misses, remove all bonuses. So it's a really good weapon. Maggie is just really good baseline. And also after an action skill use, we're going to be doing fire, corrosive, and cryo just with this Maggie as well on top of the kinetic. So it's still going to do a ton of different elemental damage, and it's going to be really good, as you'll specifically as you'll see while I'm in the raid footage. The bigger badass enemies, especially when there's one left, I'll use a Maggie on them and just spray an enemy down, and it does a ridiculous amount of damage. So it's pretty much everything I'm using with this build. All these 4 weapons, I don't switch off these in the raid. The only time I'd switch anything is if I'm doing bosses that are flesh, and then I would switch to a fire cutsman, because I also have an anointed raw on that. And that's pretty much all the different weapons I would be using. So that's this entire build. It's absolutely nuts, and I love using it, just seeing every element. And you can put every status effect on a target, so it's just like a really fast scrolling wall of text of all the different colored numbers. It's really cool to use. So subscribe if you want to see more Borderlands 3 content. Leave a like if you liked the video. Leave a comment down below what you think about this build. If you have any questions about where to get any of these items, all the items have a specific area and boss you can farm for them now. So leave a comment if you want to know anything about where any of this stuff drops. I'll try to reply to everybody, and thanks for watching.